oh, if it's not fun, that's a sign that something's wrong in the story. Okay, sometimes it's not fun because like you're working through stuff. You're working through imposter syndrome. You're working through perfectionism. Or like you're having a bad day and you're feeling bad about yourself. So you're not going to like what you wrote, even though tomorrow you might come back and look at it and be like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Which I think is where feedback is so helpful, because like fight scenes, I was afraid that I was terrible at fight scenes. And I was like, these are so hard. And like, I'm very confused and I'm like mapping stuff out. And then a lot of people were like, we love the fight scenes. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, just because it's not like, oh, Sunshine and Roses is so fun, doesn't mean it's bad. It just could mean that like you're getting used to it, or like you're having an off day.
Hello folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I am your host, Michael Vadney, author of Crownfall, a noble dark fantasy adventure. But today, we have a returning guest. K.R. House is back in the show, and last week we had you on. We were talking about your journey, your books, the Unmarked series, what you have going on for the future. But today we're bringing you back on. We want to talk about first drafts, and we want to be talking about just writing your first book. I love this subject.
Me too.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me yet again.
Yes, if you want to catch what we were talking about last week, folks, it is back on the channel. You can catch up on all of that, and then you can come back here, and we'll still be here talking it out, so we'll be waiting. But the first thing that I wanted to ask you is, I always ask my guests what they want to talk about for the second episode. I only give you the parameters of like something you enjoy talking about, like something you're passionate about. So why is this something that you are passionate about?
I think, talking about first drafts and finishing a book is something I'm passionate about because it's something that I decided I wanted to do, and that it was like the biggest thing I wanted to do in my entire life, and then didn't do it till like 10 or 12 years after I decided I wanted to do it. Like I knew I wanted to write a book when I was like 12, didn't actually start or like finish something till I was like 23 or 24. Maybe older than that. How old am I now? Maybe like 25. So over 10 years. And I think I make a lot of content for writers and people who want to be writers and maybe don't have a lot of experience with it. And I think it feels like something that just happens naturally, and you see other people do it and it looks so easy, and it's not. And I like to try to like pull back the curtain and like, if it hopefully help someone out there who is struggling to finish the book that they've always wanted to finish, just like I was however so many years ago.
No, it makes sense. And like seeing like your social media content and stuff like that with like your whiteboard content, you do have very much like the teacher vibe of, I want to pass my knowledge to you so that you don't have to struggle the way I struggle.
Yes.
I'm very for
struggle.
that.
It took me forever, but now we're here.
That we are. And let's dive into it then. So take me back to the moment that you finished your first draft of The Call of the Wind, Call of Wind, the first book of the Unmarked series. What did it feel like when you finished it?
The first draft, which is really more of a zero draft because everyone had different names, the world worked totally different. The only thing that was the same was like the magic system and one person's name. And I had challenged I got to a point where I was like, I'm tired of not doing this. I need to do it. And I listened to all these podcasts, and I'd listened to podcasts where writers talk about writing a book in a month. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get over my imposter syndrome. I'm going to force myself, and I'm going to write an entire book in a month. And I got 40,000 words in, and it was the end of the month, and I didn't know how to end it, so I like made something up, and I was extremely dissatisfied with the final thing. Like I went back to the beginning and started reading it, and I was like, I hate this. Why didn't it turn out good? I gave myself an entire month. How could this be bad? And so after that, I was like, okay, let me go back to the beginning. I made a better plan, a better outline, and I think I went through the second draft much more slowly and carefully, and like I made lots of changes, and I really thought about the story. And finishing that, like whatever, there was the second or the third, whatever, the draft after that I showed to my husband, that was like, okay, yes, I've done it. The first draft is truly done. So it was kind of like a yeah.
That's interesting. Like so much of it changed from that 0 to 1 draft. And
Yeah.
wow, okay, so only the magic system changed and one character, everything else is like mostly
Everything
different?
else is different. If you, I did a document compare, because you can do this with like this. There's this app. It's only for PC. It's called WordPress Copy or WP Copy Find, and I compared the final published version to my original like 0 draft, and they have like 1% in common.
Oh, wow.
The story's almost completely different. Like that's why I call it a 0 draft, because I'm like, is it really like the same book? I don't know, but it was the same. It was the idea that became the book.
Did you go into that 0 draft with an outline, or is this in your days where you're still pantsing?
I had a 2-page single-spaced outline that was kind of like a stream of consciousness, like this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. Oh, actually, wait, I did have another document that was like bullet points, where I was like, I had the hero's journey, right, because I was like, hero's journey, and I was like, these are the things that are going to happen at the different points of the hero's journey, and that's the book. And I ended up not really following that. And then when I went and re-outlined, I did it a completely different way. I used Notion, and I had like, the spreadsheet, they have the database views, and I had like every chapter with like description, and I was like, okay, here's the different plots. And I really was like, okay, what are the characters' arcs? Let's look at this a little more detailed.
Oh, I love that. I feel like there's so much that we try to do as like when we're trying to be authors, when we're trying to be writers, where we will read the books that tell us how to write. We will watch the YouTubes that tell us how to write. But all of that stuff is very useful, but the most useful thing is to just sit down and do it wrong and do it bad and figure out like, oh, that's why that doesn't work, because I looked at it like this and it doesn't make sense anymore. So I do like the idea of just going, for a month, I'm just going to bang out as much as I can, get those reps in. How was that feeling, though? Like, how did you deal with that? I'm trying to figure out how to word this. How did you deal with that emotional shift when you got to the end of that month and you were just like, I'm very dissatisfied? How did you move from that to, okay, let's get back to work?
I think I was dissatisfied, but I also was like, okay, I wrote 40,000 words in a month. So I was like, I can't, and that was more than I'd written in like, maybe if you took all my, 5 years before that, like maybe I'd written that much, because I was so, like I would write a little bit and then like give up. So I think knowing that I finished it helped, and then, or like, I finished kind of what I set out to do. And then there were parts of it that I liked. Like, I really liked the magic system. And I really liked my one character whose name didn't change, which I don't know if it's a spoiler to tell you who that is, but it's the mentor character. It's Ignacio. He was the same. His character has stayed mostly the same. I really liked him, and I really liked the magic. And I was like, well, I don't really want to let this idea go. So I think that helped. There was, even though I was dissatisfied, there was the little nugget that I was like, I really like this part of it.
Nice. And you were able to take that to motivate yourself to continue going, which that does make sense, because like we were talking in the previous episode, you have always known that you wanted to be a writer from a very young age. I can't remember if we said it in the last episode or if I've seen it in other interviews with you, but you've known since like middle school that this is what you wanted to do.
Yes. And I even in middle school, I was like, this is what I want to do. I was like, but I have to do other things, because nobody can just be a writer. Like, you have to have a backup plan, or like the writing is like the side thing. But so that's, I think, knowing that I wanted that also, even though I was dissatisfied with the first book, I was like, well, I'm not going to give up. It's just not an option, which is a really kind of, I tell that to some of my friends, and they're like, that's kind of intense. I'm like, yeah. I don't know why that's how I feel about it, but I do. Yeah. I'm a very like short and slightly like bubbly woman, and I feel like it's something I say things like, failure was not an option, and people are like, whoa, we didn't know that was in you.
I'm here for this. This is very like halfling barbarian energy, and I'm very okay with it.
Thank you. I literally am playing a dwarf barbarian.
Yes.
D&D
Oh my
right
God!
now.
I didn't know you played D&D. That's awesome. I love D&D.
Yeah, me too. It's fun.
I'm playing a warlock right now, and I'm just having a blast with it.
Nice.
Yes. But what I did want to ask you though is, is this the book that you always imagined that you would end up reading? Like, did you know in middle school when you were like, yes, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to write a book? Is the Unmarked series what you imagined?
I don't know what I imagined. Like, I didn't have, like, some people talk about, like, okay, like, write the book of your heart. Like, what's, like, the book that's, like, burning inside you or whatever. Like, even, like, Brandon Sanderson, I would guess that for him, that's, like, the Cosmere as a concept is, like, his thing that he's, like, even though it's got all these different things. Maybe he wouldn't say that. I don't know. But I am just, like, I just want to write stuff. I don't really, like, I had, one of my earliest things I did was picture books, because I've got 3 younger brothers, and so I wrote little picture books and like showed it to them. And then I did I had different fantasy ideas, I had different sci-fi ideas. The book I was working on before The Call of Wind was a sci-fi series that I talked a little bit about in the previous episode we did. So like, yeah, I just was like, I knew it wouldn't be speculative. I pretty much only like sci-fi and fantasy, but what that is specifically doesn't really matter to me, I guess, as long as it's cool.
Well, plus, like, I have a few things on that, actually. Fantasy and sci-fi can be anything. Like, yes, it is a genre, but it's also one of those genres that can attach itself to almost any other genre. You can have a fantasy or sci-fi mystery, a murder, a horror, a heist. Like, literally anything you can think of as a story, you can make it fantasy and sci-fi just by merging those two together. So there's so much that you can write with that.
Yes.
And I think there's this notion that when we are young and we want to write, we know we just want to write. Mm-hmm. But as we get older, we understand like what we want to say in our writing, like the themes and stuff that want to come out, the lessons that we want to teach through our writing. But when we're young, we're just like, we just want to write stories. We don't know what we want to say yet, but we want to write.
Yes, that's a good way, because I think that's definitely true. As I've gotten older, I'm like, oh, there's certain things that I think are going to be like reflective of like, oh, this is, you can tell this is a K.R. House book because she's talking about this. Whereas as a kid, I was like, I just wanted to have magic.
Yeah, and I like seeing that transition in people because I think that's why it's useful for young people when they want to start writing. The two things where it's just like, just keep writing. Doesn't matter what you write, just write something. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that I think a lot of people should hear when they want to write and they're young and they want to make a life out of this is like, live your life, do things. Yeah. Like meet people, experience stuff, because that will inform your writing. You'll learn about yourself, and through that you'll learn about people and learn about what you want to tell in a story. Because writing is such a practice in empathy and understanding, and you can't do that unless you've practiced it in real life. That's my personal opinion, though.
Yes, I think that's so true. That's such a good way to say it, because I've heard the writing and reading is like an exercise in empathy, and it's like, well, yeah, but you have to do that also in your real life to be able to replicate it.
Yes.
Yeah. And even like sci-fi and fantasy is all about, even the made up stuff is all about real life and real people. It's just like, we're going to take these real things and put them in a different lens to get you to look at them in a different way. Suspend
your reality and hopefully you find truths in your real life about it. Oh. Like, I feel like there's so many I know we're getting off topic a little bit here, but okay. there's so many life lessons that I have learned from reading fiction, like bringing this back to Brandon Sanderson. What is the most important step a man can take? The next one, which is like so stoicism, and I love stoicism. There's just so many good lessons that you can learn and understand other people through reading. Oh, I could talk about this forever. I'm going to get off topic so hard.
To add to that just a little bit before we get back on track, like we were talking about in the last episode about Emma Wong and Sword of Kaigen, I think, so I don't have kids. I want to at some point. And Sword of Kaigen explored the idea of like motherhood and being a mom in like such a different way than I've seen in a lot of stuff. And like, I feel like she was able to like look at this just differently because it's in this like completely different context in this different world, and there's the struggles that the main character's facing is not struggles that I would face of like this magic whatever, but it's like, oh, there's things in that I'm like, oh yeah, this has changed how I view this, which I think is just really awesome.
Yeah, through Misaki, you learn about family, you learn about
Yes.
motherhood, which is like, that's not something I'm ever going to experience. I'm never going to be a mother, but I learned a lot about motherhood through that story. Ah, stories are so cool.
Stories are
Let's,
awesome. They're
let's
so
just
good.
talk about this forever. But getting back onto the subject, I'm actually kind of curious when you were working through this first draft and you were saying you were surprised how hard it was. Was there ever a point where you kind of looked at yourself in the mirror and just went, "Do I actually want to do this?" And what kept you going in that moment?
I think there were definitely parts where I'm like, well, I'm not having a good time right now. Especially like as I was going through it, the first draft and then like the second, the third, like I was working full time and like my job was getting more and more demanding. And so I was like writing before work and I was like, I'm not really liking that I'm doing this. And like I'm saying no to hanging out with people so that I can write in the evenings or on the weekends or whatever. I just was like, I don't know why I'm so fixated on it. I was like, it was never an option to not do it. And I think it's just as like we were talking in the last episode about reading The Hobbit and like being like, oh wow, fantasy's my whole identity now. Like that as a kid, like that was 100% my like so much of my world, and even like my memories when I think back as a kid are like memories from my real life and then memories of the things that happened in what I was reading. So I was like, it was never like, yeah, I was never gonna quit, at least not without giving it a really, really good try. And I did still like it. Like I'm making it sound like it was like this brutal, like punch the tree 1,000 times, and it kind of was. But it was still satisfying. Like even if I wrote 2,000 words and then I went to work and I didn't like those 2,000 words, at least I knew I'd written 2,000 words, and that was satisfying and rewarding of its own.
Yeah, you were taking steps towards the thing that you wanted, and you still wanted, even though those steps were a very steep incline.
I compare it to working out, which is not something that I was not a sporty kid. I didn't grow up doing that, but I was like, as I got, your first job, you're sitting a lot. I was like, I need to work out.
You start taking care of yourself.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'm getting back pain. Like, that's not great. When you first start working out, like, it sucks, but then you still feel good that you did it. And then as you do it, you're like, oh, I can actually enjoy this. And I'm listening to a book at the gym. And now this is actually a nice time. And I'm doing better than I was before. So, yeah, I think they're very similar in my mind. Like, working out and, like, writing are, like, similar types of things.
Yeah, you learn to enjoy the suffering is how I like to think about it.
That stoicism in you.
It is. It definitely is. But it just made sense to me, where it's just like, if you enjoy the hard parts, if you can convince yourself to enjoy the struggle, then every single part of it is a reward. It's not just the end where you have a finished book in your hand, and that's awesome, but the fun part is writing it along the way. But it's also the hard part.
Like Brandon said, like journey before destination, right?
Yes, that is exactly that. Yes, absolutely love that. So when you were writing Call of the Wind, how did you know it was actually done? Because you're a person of many ideas, and it's really hard to not cram them all in there. How did you know when you were done with the story?
Man, part of it helped just like setting a deadline. And part of me is like, okay, I know, because like the second book, I am a lot more confident about it than I am the first book. Like the first book is good and I think it's fun, but the second book is like, I'm like, yes, okay, I'm starting to achieve some of the things I want my writing to achieve. And I'm like, oh, if I'd spent another year with the first book, maybe it could have been as good as the second book. But I also knew at the time, I was like, I'm dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. I think I just need to get it out there. And I went to this conference called Author Nation, and I met this editor there who's my editor. Her name is Kara Epsey, Mid-Write Edits. She's very good. And I met her, and we really like clicked, and I was like, okay, I want her to edit my book. And she was free at a specific time, so I like forced myself to send it to her. And then I was like, okay, because I've already agreed to send it to her and paid her like the first half of it, like now I can't like back out of it. And there were things that like I want to, like I told one of my friends, I was like, oh, I wish I spent more time like describing their clothes. And she was like, I don't think that's necessary. So like some things you're like, oh, like imagine if I had all these more rich descriptions. And it's like, maybe it's better because I stopped fiddling with it. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like that is the curse of every artist in every medium, whether it's like painting, writing, or music. when you are completed with a project, you're always going to look back on it and go, but I know so much more now. I could do so, like, that project could be better if this version of me was doing it.
Yeah.
It's hard to
I
let
think
go
you
of
kind
that.
It is. And I think you almost kind of have to let the project go before it feels safe to do so. Like, before
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. Otherwise, you could work on it forever.
Yeah, and that definitely happens. There are a lot of authors out there that spend a very long time on their stories and just take decades to release them. And I've talked to a few authors on the show where it's like their first book did take that long. And I feel like on a first book, I'll understand that because there's so
Yeah.
much about that. You're learning about what it means to be an author and how you're trying to become one. But after that, I'm like, all right, you need to know when to let it go. And sometimes someone else has to be the person that tells you because you're just too close to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why it's helpful to have editors and beta readers and writer friends and all that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Like, we are the authors who write the book, but it is definitely a community that comes together to make them possible. So while you were drafting then and writing your first book, what would you say is like the hardest part to crack for you while you were drafting?
I think I fall victim to the soggy middle. If you hear people use that term, the middle of the book is the hardest. I love, like I said, I love new ideas. Beginnings, super fun. I think the beginning of The Call of Wind is great because it's like, boom, here's this crazy thing that's happening. You're like, whoa, they're doing that. That's crazy. The endings are fun because you're wrapping stuff up. Like the energy is getting more intense. The middle is like, ugh, they can't just do the same thing over and over again. And I struggled with making it feel like I didn't want it to feel like just like monster encounter, enemy encounter. Like, it was hard to like, okay, how do I still weave in, good character moments, things still feel like they're progressing and not just random stuff is happening to fill time. So that part definitely got revised a lot more than the rest of it because I was like, well, what should be happening here?
Yeah. Yeah, middles are hard. Like, I definitely struggled with mine on Crownfall a lot as well. And I think for me personally, one of the things that helped that I should have done way earlier in the process was creating a timeline. Because I didn't make a timeline until I had like 6 or 7 drafts done. Yeah, it was a lot. And once I got a timeline down, I was like, wait, if this happens, this can't happen yet. It has to go in this order. Doing that helped me figure out my middle so much. Is there a certain technique that helped you conquer your middle?
Well, honestly, it's kind of a hack was having 2 POV main characters because the middles were shorter.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I think having like a midpoint really helped.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if it comes across as for like the readers, but in my mind, like, okay, both of their stories have a point in the middle that they're like kind of revolving around. And that really helps like give the middle some structure.
Yeah.
And then just like also being okay with they can have like a we're sitting around the campfire scene. I think I was afraid to like let the plot breathe in my first drafts, and I'm like, no, it's actually okay for them to like no action is happening. They're just interacting. And I think realizing that also helped it be better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's hard to. A lot of people do fall, especially in their first book, in the go, 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 things must be happening all the time, or the exact opposite where everything takes forever. And it's hard to balance that out. Like, it's hard to know when to let your plot breathe and when you need to rush and pump up the action. But you learn that by doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So ignoring your draft 0, the one that you like pumped out in a month and was like 40,000 something words, and focusing on draft 1, when you completed that, what would you say is the most surprising result that came out of finishing that first draft?
A surprising result of coming out of I think I wasn't expecting to still rewrite, like to still change like plot points. Like my draft changed a lot even from that. It sounds like you're similar. You have like a lot of different drafts. I did too. And I feel like my, when I finished it, I was like, okay, like the structure is basically there. But no, I was still changing pretty significant plot things up, like even after getting it back from my editor, like, being like, oh no, this needs to be revealed here instead of over here because, to keep tension up or whatever.
Did you find that you ran into that when you were writing book 2 as well? Or was it like refined because you had learned what you needed to do earlier in book 1?
So book 2, I think one thing about book 2 that makes it different from book 1 is that the middle of book 2 is like a very clear midpoint of not just the book, but of like the entire trilogy. And like that part was so crystal clear in my mind that like I think it helped the rest of the stuff fall into place. The other thing that made book 2 easier is I've got more things going on. So book 2 felt more like, okay, this has to happen here, and this has to happen here, and this has to happen here, because we're trying to get to this point, and I know we're setting up for this in book 3. Whereas book 1 felt like it had more like, more possibilities. Like maybe they're spending this much time in this forest, or maybe they're not. So I think book 2, because it was in between, what's crystallized in book 1 and then setting up stuff, I felt like there were more things it had to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
No, I like that. I just thought I liked it. The thing that I found very interesting about what you just said was that book 2 sounds like it has more complexity, but because of that, it was easier to write, which I find very interesting.
That's okay. It's fair. I didn't realize that was what I said, but I stand by it. I'm like, oh yeah, I see that is kind of unusual. I think, yeah, because it was more complex. Maybe this is a symptom of me being kind of like a ideas dog person. It being more complex actually made it easier, I think, because it was like there's less room for error, which also doesn't make sense. But like because it was like, oh, there's all these things that must happen, it kind of like told itself. Maybe that kind of can put that into context. Like the story.
Okay. So it's like all the pieces are tighter together.
Yes, there's less like dead space in the story because there's all these things it has to like keep up or explain or wrap up. It's like it kind of it kind of told itself. Like it was very like, okay, it's a puzzle and like the puzzle pieces fit together better than like in book 1 the puzzle pieces could go in lots of different places.
Yeah, okay. I think I understand what you're saying. I'm picking up what you're saying.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. That's probably... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's not how it would feel for everyone, but that's how it felt for me. I was like, okay, this has to work this way.
This is why I like doing these interviews, though, is because like everybody writes their books different, and everybody writes their first book. How they come to their first book is always very different and very interesting to hear how people tackle that, especially since most of us have thought about writing a book for years before we finally write the book that ends up being our first one. And that transition is always very exciting for me. Something I did want to ask you about, and we've talked about it a little bit off and on through both these episodes, is through your characters in book 1. How would you say you really like discovered them? Because you talked about how draft 0, they're completely different. They're not even the same people. Draft 1, they started formulating. At what point in the drafting series did you finally start to feel like, okay, I know who these people are?
I could not tell you off the top of my head specifically what draft. I've got like a spreadsheet of the different drafts. Maybe.
Oh, I love that.
Maybe I can. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I can find it, or I'll send it to you or something. Oh, here we go. Changing drafts. Yeah.
Oh, you're ready.
Okay, I have a note that said because I made a video about how much the draft changed, so I've got a spreadsheet. Okay. I felt like draft 3 was when the book became the book that it is today. So like that's when everything was like, okay, this is the story. Like the plot still changed a lot, but Mark was who he was. Elias is who he is, or who he was. Who they both are who they is. I don't know. It's present tense.
Pronouns are.
Verbs, pronouns. It's all confusing. So, both my main characters became the people that they are. My side characters all became like I know who was in the book, and yeah, that's when I was like, okay, this is all starting to make sense.
Okay. And how many drafts total did it take to write the first book of the Unmarked series?
I would say I counted as 9 drafts, which is not starting, like deleting, like, starting a new draft. And I know some people, I've said that and people think that's what I did, but no, it's from like, okay, I'm stuck here copying, making changes, or moving stuff around.
In every draft, you tend to have like slightly different goals for what you're working on as you're trying to just like pare it down from the marble to the statue. Like I get that. Like I call it 10 drafts. I don't know if it's actually 10 drafts. It's just, it gets fuzzy at the end. You never know when one draft ends and the next one begins.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah. But I agree. It's around for me, it was around draft 3 or 4 that I really started to feel like, okay, the big plot points are the same. Nothing about that is going to change. The characters are mostly the same as well. It's just from here on, we're tightening everything, we're sharpening what needs to be sharpening, and we're blunting the edges that need to be blunted. That's all we're doing from here on forward. It's just trying to make this story that we have found better.
Yeah. Drafts 1 and 2 were like, and 3 were like trying to figure out like what is the story. And then at 3 it's like, okay, yes, this is what the story is. Now how do we make it a good story?
We get a lot of advice on writing, and especially like on the internet, participating in social media, or even just like talking to people and stuff like that. Is there any advice that you got very early on when you were working on your first book that really turned out to be wrong for you?
So I consume a lot of writing advice content, which probably makes sense. I make writing advice content. I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts and stuff. Like I listen to your podcast. If there's a podcast out there about writing, I've probably listened to it. Yes. I think one thing when I was younger, I thought pantsing was the way to go, and that ended up not being how I operate. And then I think I've heard people say like, oh, if it's not fun, that's a sign that something's wrong in the story. And I think that was like we've talked about earlier, like, okay, sometimes it's not fun because like you're working through stuff. You're working through imposter syndrome. You're working through perfectionism. Or like you're having a bad day and you're feeling bad about yourself. So you're not going to like what you wrote, even though tomorrow you might come back and look at it and be like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Which I think is where feedback is so helpful, because like there were things that I was like, I think like fight scenes. I was afraid that I was terrible at fight scenes. And I was like, these are so hard. And like, I'm very confused and I'm like mapping stuff out. And then a lot of people were like, we love the fight scenes. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, just because it's not like, oh, Sunshine and Roses is so fun, doesn't mean it's bad. It just could mean that like you're getting used to it, or like you're having an off day.
Yeah. And I feel like that emphasizes the importance of feedback as well, because we get so much in our heads about like which parts of our story we are good or bad at writing. But then when we hand it off to someone else, a lot of times it is such an inaccurate picture, especially for those who are writing their first book. You learned you are good at writing fight scenes, even though you felt horrible about them. Like, I feel like so many people run into that.
Yeah, I was like, I've never been in a fight. How could I write a fight scene? This is going to be so unrealistic, but it was fine.
A lot of times, like, realism in fight scenes and stuff like that is like a mixed bag. Like, you want it to be realistic to a point, but you want it to be cool and interesting to read more than that.
Yes.
We talked about this a little bit in the last episode, the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. Very good fight scenes in that. And he actually points out that he did research on a book called The Meditations of Violence.
Oh.
And he read that in order to better understand the realism of fights. But he talks in his author notes in one of the books where he's like, I learned a lot from that, and you'll see a lot of that in these stories. But ultimately, I also put in things that were just cool.
Yes,
because they're fun to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, real cool. Definitely the winner of all things. Oh, but something I also wanted to react to what you were saying earlier was this romanticizing of pantsing. I feel like this is a notion that a lot of us early writers have, where it's just like, if it's true art, it will come from my soul and just pour onto the page. And the reality is, especially if you're trying to like make writing a career, something that you pay your bills with, it's not always going to be that way. And in my experience, I think we find that people who pants a little bit and plot a little bit go really far.
I think it's becoming a lot more common to talk about your process like that. Like I remember reading a lot of articles as a kid where it's like, or books on writing, and it's like, you're a pantser or you're a plotter, and these are the only things that people are. And like, I don't think people are
only options.
Yeah, I don't think it was like people are intending to like stifle you, but now I hear people talk about their process and they're like, oh, I start here and then I do this and then I, whatever, or people will pants an entire book and then use that as the outline for this next draft, which I think is an intense process. Yeah. So I think I'm not someone who's like, you have to plot, but I always tell people, if you've only ever tried it one way and you've never been able to finish a project, maybe try doing it the other way. Even if you think, oh, that's not my personality, I'm a free thinker, or oh no, I'm so organized, I should be a plotter. It's like, well, no, you're not even. You got to try it. You don't know until you try it.
Sorry, you got me with the free thinker bit. That was good.
Thanks, because I was like, I'm not an organized person, and so I was like, well, there's no way outlining. I'm an outliner because I'm so disorganized. But nah, it's not how it works.
No, and it goes both ways. Like, people who outline should try pantsing, because there's a lot of, both styles are great, but they're great at different things. Like, plotting is really good at like getting the structure of a story, getting you a cohesive plot. While pantsing, I feel like you get more natural characters and more natural expressions of emotion. You probably can't plot your way into humor too easily either. I feel like humor is one of those things you got to feel out a little bit.
I definitely don't think I've ever planned like the funny moment in a book. I mean, there's probably someone out there who does, but I think you're right. That tends to be like, it just kind of has to happen.
Yeah, these organic moments. So we talked about this a little bit, where you intended the first book to be a standalone at first. At what point while you were writing it did you go, nope, this has got to be a series? Like, did you finish the book? Or did you know before?
Well, I finished my zero draft that I didn't like. That was the write a book in a month draft. And when I went back, I was like, I have to fix this. And as I was trying to re-outline it and like make my more specific outline, I was like, this, I think, is a trilogy. And from doing that, I was like, oh no, this is not one book. This is a trilogy. And I was like, I think if it's a trilogy, it can be like it will make a lot of sense. And like all the different things can happen that need to happen for this to be satisfying. Yeah, that was how I knew. I was like, oh no, you're a trilogy.
Plus, if it's a trilogy, you get to jam pack all those ideas you've been coming up with.
Yup.
Just saying.
True.
So, going back to the first draft, if you had to go talk to first draft you, what is the thing that you would tell them to change everything?
I would say relax a little bit. It's okay. Just let it, like even though I said, okay, the advice that if it's not fun, it's wrong, wasn't good for advice for me. But also, like, I could have had more fun if I calmed down a little bit. That, and then just like, have a better outline, because I didn't know I needed that. That would have also changed my first draft experience, which is why I'm excited to do a new project with like totally new characters once I finish this one, and to see, okay, what's it like when I outline like this from the beginning? Like, it'll be a different experience.
Yeah. Speaking of different projects, though, the Unmarked series was not the first thing that you really wrote. You mentioned earlier there was like a sci-fi story and stuff that you were worked on for a little bit. What was it about the first drafts and the early processes of those other projects that went, no, I'm going to move on to something else? Like, how did you decide this wasn't going to be the first book?
Honestly, I think some of those projects could have been the first book if I'd had a different attitude about it. I think there is a thing to just being young and some of my ideas being immature. Like, I had one idea where I was like, chosen ones, they're everywhere. But what if he was chosen to be cursed? And that was the plot. And I don't think that's a bad idea. It is kind of like an edgy 14-year-old idea, but like, it probably could have been a book if I knew what I was doing. So there's something like that where some of my ideas are a little immature. But also I think, it was really just my attitude where I would get stuck. I would be mad about it. And then I would be like, well, I guess I have to move on. And that's just not really the way I approach it anymore. Now I know if I get stuck, I can go to my outline, or I can like, okay, take a week or two off and like come back to it.
I like that. Because I feel like there's so much, like we were talking about earlier, with when you're young and you want to write, like one of the things that you do is just write. You just need to write something. But figuring out when this is going to be the something that you finally like take the last mile, I think that's hard to figure out sometimes. And it's one of those things where there's not really a strict rubric that you can go like, okay, if I do these 6 things, I can publish this book. It's one of those things you kind of just have to feel it. You have to know it. You have to feel confident in it. And not even just confident that it's going to be amazing, just confident that it's worth putting out there. Yeah,
it's kind of just like, I think there's definitely a real thing to writing, and like that there's seasons in your life where it's like you're not going to be able to write you're not ready for it yet, or like maybe you have to step away from it because it is a creative thing. And it's like, you know, I think in high school I don't think I was ready to finish a book, even though I definitely thought I was. Other people are. So if you're in high school and you're watching this, don't think that means you're not ready. I'm just saying I wasn't ready. So yeah, it's just there's that woo-woo element of like sometimes the right time comes and you'll know it when it's there.
Yeah, it does feel a little like ooh-woo and stuff like that, and I get it, like, that is gonna like turn some people off, but sometimes you just know and you're ready to move forward. The last question, though, that I wanted to ask you for this evening is, you're thinking about your next project, the next series that you're going to be going into, and you're going to start with that new first book, that first draft of something that's fresh to you. What is like the biggest thing that you learned from writing the Unmarked series that you think you're going to take into that first draft for this new series?
I think one thing will be pacing. I don't dislike the pacing of my book, but I have gotten feedback that like the pacing of book 1 starts a little slow. And then in book 2, when I gave it to my editor, she was like, the pacing at the beginning of this, she's like, also it starts a little slow, like we can speed it up. So I think I've learned like, okay, I can introduce all these characters and this stuff and then have a promise of something that's going to automatically make it feel like things are happening faster, even though like maybe nothing's actually happening different, but I've moved the promise up. You know, Brandon Sanderson talks about promise, progress, payoff. If you move the promise up, things feel faster. So that's one thing. And then I also want to do more like we were talking about, more outlining, more world building and planning up front. I think that'll really help me, because with the Unmarked series, with book 1 and even with book 2, there are parts where I had to go back and like, okay, wait, let me I have this question now about the world. Let me refigure that out. I think there's always going to be some of that, but I have a better idea now of how much I would like to have before actually starting the draft.
I couldn't agree more. I'm taking so much of that energy into this new series that I'm planning, where it's just like, all right, here's a big old list of things that I need to know before I start this time, because I'm not going to make the same mistake I did on the last one.
Yes, it's like I'm better now. Let's see how this goes.
Yes. I'm very prepared for this boss fight. Thank you very much for all the training, Crownfall. We got there. But we are nearing the end of the episode. Can you tell the people, where can they find your books? Where can they find you?
Okay, so you can find my books. They're on Amazon in Kindle Unlimited. Book 2 comes out August 18th, so be on the lookout for that. Book 1 is on Audible. So that's awesome. It's Audible exclusive. Book 2 will be on Audible later in the year. And then you can also buy signed copies directly from me at krhousebooks.com. And all the links for all those things are in my Instagram bio, my TikTok bio. I'm on Facebook, YouTube Shorts, very minimally. If you want to like interact with me, I'm most active on Instagram, author KR House on all platforms. So yeah, that's where I am.
Yes, and we will have all of that linked down below. In case you got distracted, you will find it.
Yes.
But thank you for coming on to the show last week and this week. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was super fun.
Of course. And folks, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See ya. And we did the thing again!